Everybody's had a Monroe story today, and I've got one. I meant to tell you a while ago. Mac Wiseman touched on that Mole Lake, Wisconsin festival they used to have.
Yeah.
If you didn't have a gun when you got there, they gave you one.
That's right.
But I was up there, and I went down in the basement, and that stage must have been 20 feet high, and they had a fence up in front of it. They had a gate, and on our side, on the entertainer side, it was if you wanted to go out into the crowd, enter at your own risk. That's a true story, and it was on a reservation. But anyway, I went down, and Monroe was there, and I hadn't seen him in a while, and I said, "How you been doing, Mr. Bill?" I just got back from Israel. Said I got baptized in the River of Jordan. And I said, "Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that." He said, I went over with Reverend Jimmy Snow, I believe it was. Uh-huh. And I said, "Well, that's wonderful news, Bill." I said, "Well, how did you like it over there?" He said, "It's like a different country over there."
Who was it yesterday that was telling the story about Mr. Monroe and the donuts?
Oh.
Tell that, Ricky.
Well, they were up in New York City doing a real early television, like a news show like a Today Show or ABC Morning News or some kind of thing. So they were there like at 5:30, rehearsing and all, getting ready. And Billy Joe Foster, this kid played fiddle with Bill. He's a kid from Oklahoma. He used to play in my band, and so he was telling me this, and he said, Mr. Bill went in there where some coffee was, and a little food and fruit and stuff like that was set up, and he come around there and he said, "Billy Joe," he said, "boy, you need to stay away from them donuts. Them's the toughest things, and they ain't a bit sweet." And he'd got a hold of a bagel. That's the toughest thing right there. Since we're telling Monroe stories, you got to tell us the one you told me yesterday about this guy that brought Bill a mandolin.
Well, Ronnie Reno told me this.
Blame it on Ronnie.
Blame.
He said before he knew it was about a true story, and knowing Bill as I shared and not only me but other people, I shared the last 15 years he lived in dressing room number 2 down there with him, and I saw some of the funniest stories of the things that happened that you could imagine it happened there. I didn't think that's funny at the time, but you didn't. No, you get off and get the thing, but I said, "Boy, that was fun." You just laugh your rear end off at it, So, but Ronnie told me this story here, and it's typical. It's typical of Bill Monroe. He thinks like this right here, but this old boy walked up to him with a mandolin, and he banged it right in front of Bill, and everything, and he said, "I'd like to know, tell me how my mandolin playing is, good, bad, or whatever." Bill said, "Let me have the mandolin." So Bill gets the mandolin, he goes all over it and playing it, he reaches it back to him, he says, "Well, it ain't the mandolin."
That is so priceless right there, son.
I've got one more since we're telling. I was actually standing, when I was a little boy, Bill sort of took me under his wing and showed me mandolin and showed me a lot of stuff. And so every time Bill was around, I was with him, and so we was standing around up there at Berryville one day, and standing there talking to this elderly man. And Bill said, was talking to him and asked him how he was doing. And the guy said, "Well, I ain't doing all that well, Bill." And Bill said, he said, "Well, how old are you?" He said, "Well, I'm 88. He said, right there's your problem."
Oh, that's your problem right there.
I want to tell you one more.
I knew it.
Down there in the dressing room, too, one night, it's Christmas time, And Jim and Jesse's fiddle player had went home for Christmas. Well, Vassar Clemens come down there and was going to fill in for the guy. Well, Vassar went over there and put his fiddle case right where Bill generally put his mandolin case. So Bill, they had some seats in the dressing room, chairs, and sat down. So Bill and a whole bunch of us was there. Kenny Baker was there, you know. And Bill asked me, he said, Bobby, who's that fiddle over there? I said, who? He said, that fiddler standing over there with his back this way. I said, it's Vassar Clemens. Is that right? I said, yeah, that's who that is, you know. And he said, he's ruined every fiddle player in this town. He destroyed him. And I said, how do you do that, Bill? He just can't play Katie Hill no more, you know. And he kept going on about that and just on and on and on. Wow. And Baker was, by this time, Baker pretty got irritated. He was walking right up, prancing right in front of Bill, kicking the carpet, you know, and not saying a word. Bill right on. Vassar left, by the way. He got out. He kept his back turned to Bill. He never did look at Monroe, but he walked outside. And Bill waited till he got out the door like that right there, and then he started talking about Vassar. He destroyed everybody that played the fiddle down there. You know, couldn't play Katie Hill and them tunes anymore. Well, Kenny kept prancing back and forth, you know, and Bill kept right on sitting. Kenny walked in front of me and said, "Hey, you ain't hurt my fiddle playing on. Not a bit in the world." He stopped right in front of Bill and told him that. Bill said, he was just looking off like this right here, you know. Kenny said, he looked at Bill again and he turned. Kenny walked out the door. Bill sat right there and he waited till that door shut, you know. He was sure Kenny was gone. He said, "I don't care what he said. Vassar Clemens ruined every fiddle player."
He wouldn't have it any other way.
What's the story? And y'all probably all the story about what Bill said about Vassar and turkey and straw.
Oh, do you know that, Rick?
Yeah. Vassar was on playing. You know, he was on with somebody out there playing, and Bill and them was backstage, you know, getting ready to go on after that. And Vassar came off and came in the dressing room, and he said, Vassar, what was the name of that tune you was playing out there? He said, "Well, Bill has a turkey and a straw." He said, No. He said, "There wasn't no turkey in 100 miles of that right there." You know.
Bill, I got one more quick story. A friend of mine out in Oklahoma said, everybody had Monroe stories. He said, here's one that happened to us. Ricky, do you remember Gary Price?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he emailed me this story, and he said they were Bill and somebody was putting on a festival in Oklahoma, and he was there, and so Bill got there, and he said, "I need to get a ride to Fort Worth." I think Bill Mack still had a radio program over there. It was about 4 hours. So Gary said, "I volunteered," and he said a friend of mine that played the mandolin, he volunteered. And he said, "Man, we couldn't believe we was going to get to ride for 4 hours with Bill and 4 hours back." So he said, "Well, we'll take you." And he said, "Do you have a pillow?" He said, "Yeah." So he went to his motor home, got him a pillow. Said, we got in the car, and he said the first thing Bill did was beat that pillow up a little bit and lay his head down and went sound asleep. So on the way out to the drive, they got to talking about people that had played good roles with different people and had to play different things. And the mandolin picker, he mentioned me. I played banjo and played guitar with Crow and etc. whatever, you know. And Gary said, well, you know Joe Stewart. He said, Joe played everything in the world with Bill, everything, including the mandolin for a while. And he said, he's played everything. And he said, they heard a voice said, I never did like to hear Joe Stewart play the banjo. And that was it.
He woke up just long enough to say that.
Put his lay back down, slept all the way to Fort Worth and all the way back.